Hello, so this is Dr. David Boison. I just want to do this quick presentation just to guide you guys on your Viva, your defense for your dissertation. So this is just a quick guide as to how to go about it. Just ensure that your slides are numbered, your topic is illegible, it's readable. In most cases, we are looking at maybe between 18 to 20 points for the topic. It depends. In some cases, the school will give you a guide and you need to follow that to the letter. So you have your name and you have your ID, okay, your name and your ID and the supervisor. Okay, now for this topic, you know what it talks about, the effect of compliance or non-compliance in public procurement delivery, a case study of selected public institutions. And I have the permission of Dr. Noble to use this as an example. So you have your outline, and your outline based on the whatever format the school will give to you, just align it to that. And you have introduction, problem statement, research objective and questions, hypothesis, if any. Later review is in three folds. You have the theoretical, you have the empirical, and the conceptual if you decided to conceptualize something, and then the methodology, results, and recommendation, conclusions, and reference. Now take note that I think you have 10 minutes to do this presentation. You'll be given 8 minutes, and I think 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes for questioning and all that. Whatever it is, make sure you hit this thing within that period. So let's go to the introduction. Now, the introduction is just a brief history about the whole concept and the definition of the key concepts, and also you also leverage on some statistical data about the history just to tell you what is really happening, and also you also give justification for need of that study. So you realize that for each of the bullet point this guy has used, there is reference to that bullet point. And remember, it is PowerPoint, it is not power words. So you state the point and then you bring the reference. Take note that your explanation or your delivery will bring the detail. So don't bring the details in the presentation. So just have your bullet point. This guy has 4 bullet points and that's it. And they are solid because they come with what? Proof, evidence. So public firms are known for their large purchases, dealings, and with colossal budget, and then he gives reference. Now, your references should also not be more than 5 years. Now, this study, was somewhere was done somewhere in 2017 or so. So it should not be more, more than what, 5 years. Okay, so 5 years and above, that's okay. So somewhere you are in 20, what do you call it, 20, so, or let's say 2019, 2020 is not done yet. So something from 2014 to date. For social sciences, that is okay. But if you are you are doing a certain course, probably in the IT industry where the changes are just rampant, then or in your that field of study where things keeps changing, then it becomes a problem. So he talks about that, and then Muhammad 2010 therefore emphasize. But you see, you are presenting. Make sure that you link each of the pages to the other. So for instance, for this one, if the guy was going to move to the next page, we would have said, okay, in Ghana, the situation is not different, as 70% of GDP and approximately 80% of tax revenue are attributed to what procurement delivery. You are not supposed to read. I'm using that as an example. I would have said, according to the World Bank, report in 2007, okay, and the situation in Ghana is not different, as 70% of GDP is accounted, for tax revenue attributed to procurement. All right, so in this perspective, the study decided to establish what the problem, then you move to the problem statement. So you link, the introduction to the problem statement. Now remember, the problem statement should be able to state the specific problem with reference. From that, you need to also state I mean, any reference regarding any statistical data relating to the problem, I mean, to the industry. I'm not to tell you what problem statement is, but I'm just stating the fact. So those facts that establishes the problem should be brought in the problem statement. I've said problem statement has about 4 components. The first thing is the specific problem. The second thing is the fact that you are giving statistical information about the problem. The third thing is that you are elevating the problem from that industry to other industry or making it global. And the last one is the fact that you're establishing the urgent need for that study. What other studies have done, and the fact that you would want to leverage on that to establish certain literature gap or methodological gap or any gap you want to. If there's no gap and you're adding to the plethora of literature, what is already existing, that is fine. So you see with this one, I mean, the problem is stated annual reports from Public Procurement Authority, Alliance for Integrity Management Report 2017. You saw Haxon, report, and then he says that there is a literature gap, okay, specifically on the compliance issues, specifically. There's a literature gap, and then he states the literature which has a gap. So you can pack the literatures here, 3, 4, 5, and says specifically on compliance and non-compliance, and then he brings the variable, and then therefore the need for the study. So these ones will be in the rhetoric, it will be in the discussion. So from the problem statement, then you can link also to, the objectives. So I may say that, or I would want to say that now from the problem identified, the study also sets some specific targets, then that is leading you to the objectives and the research questions, okay? Some specific targets and also some research questions were what also outlined to address this specific problem. Then you turn to the research questions. And this what this guy did. You have the objectives as against the research questions on one page, and that reduces the time. What you could do here is to rather hit on the research questions or hit on the objectives. So I would have said that objective 1 is to do this, the objective 2 is to do this, and then that is the corresponding research question, but without necessarily mentioning it because you don't have time. And then the question 3 talks about this, and then question 4, so that you would not, have to read everything. So if you are talking about the questions, you can say, the corresponding objective is this. If you are talking about the objective, you make mention of the corresponding research question as well. And then, yes, you move from here and then to the next slide. You understand? In most cases, you may want to talk about the significance of the study. Some other, format they've given, if it is in the format the school gave to you, you would have established the significance of the study that based on these objectives, the study, it will be significant in the following ways. And then you bring the significance of the study, if that slide is available. That one, how it contributes to the case study organization, how it also drives policy, and then policy formulation and implementation, and also how it is able to improve on the existing literature that we have in terms of the methodology, in terms of the findings, and also the recommendations. So if you're adding that, you can add that to it. Then we come to the literature review. First of all, if you saw the outline, we are talking about theoretical review. And here you have the theory. Now, who propounded the theory and the implication of the theory to the study, all right? So the implication, how relevant is the theory to the study? Okay, this guy is talking about public procurement, delivery and legitimacy theory. It's a theory that is subsumed in those institutions. Institutions have legitimacy. There are rules and regulations that guides them. Okay, they are enacted by laws, so they have the legitimacy to do what they are doing. So Hugh et al. Talks about legitimacy theory. So how that affects, the work. So you are grounding your whole work based on theoretical foundation. So here it says compliance with and reaction to legitimacy rules and regulation, the context of fairness. He brought something. I mean, in that regards, it depends on how you want to explain it. And principal agent theory, because most public institutions, I mean, act in the stead of what the government. So they become agents. So there's a principal, I mean, agent relation. So these theories align with the study. And it's important that in your discussion, you establish that. Then you come to the empirical review, where I always advise students, this is what you do. When you pick one research question, look for literature that supports that research question. You know that the reviews we do for the empirical review that we do, they are supposed to answer some of the questions that we have asked, the generic questions, research questions we have asked, because those reviews sought to their findings from, I mean, literature that sought to also answer that similar question. So you want to align it on that level. So research question and literature that seeks to what? Answer that research question. You can also do it on the objective level. It's the same thing. So when you pick the first one, you have one literature that aligns with it. Talk about the methodology and then the findings. Okay. And the same thing, the second one, if you have four objectives, have four, I mean, empirical reviews and align them. And it is easy to do that. And it's easy for the panel to understand what you are doing, okay? So that you don't go into generalization. And here, don't read. I mean, just talk about what the study sought to achieve and what they found. The methodology, you can state it. And in some cases, they want you to establish gap. You can add that to it. But the fact of the matter, research is not always done to establish gap. You may want to improve on what others have done, okay? That not necessarily, or add to the existing literature what has not been added. And you guys have to be very careful when you're establishing gaps. Sometimes, most of you think that for the fact that the study was done in Ghana and it was not done in Nigeria, that is a gap. That is not a gap, all right? When you're talking about literature gap, it is the study stating its own limitations. Its limitations now becomes what? A gap. You cannot sit somewhere and say that because the person didn't do this, because that is a gap. So if you want to establish gap, go to the limitation of the study, and then the study had already indicated that, I mean, I sought to achieve this objective, but I was not able because I was limited in terms of population size, sample size. I was limited in terms of the respondents that I spoke to, limited in terms of methodology. There are certain things I couldn't do and all that, or I didn't get the tools to do the proper analysis and all that. These are things that the study would have established itself. So you can use that to establish the gap. Other than that, if you are adding on to existing literature, it's very important that that is done. So here, remember, you are transitioning from one slide to the other. So having spoken about the significance of the study, you would have said that, I mean, the next slide is talking about the theoretical review. So the study established certain theories, okay, which, I mean, aligns with the study. And these theories are, then you talk about them. Then from there, you transition to the empirical review. These are evidential papers that have been peer reviewed, and we review this papers just to see if there are any gaps or if there are any limitations that our study will be able to address, okay? And that's why these things are done. That's the essence of empirical review anyway. Tell us what others have done, what are the issues, and what are the gaps, if there are any, and how can we improve on those gaps, okay? Then if you also develop a kind of a conceptual, I mean, framework where you introduce some values in it, then you need to also bring that. And remember, at this stage, take your time to explain the variables in here. Don't take too much time, but make sure if there are dependent and independent variables, explain them. And if there are some hypotheses that you want to establish, explain that one as well, okay? Then you come to the methodology. Now, you don't waste too much time here to explain what the methodology is, okay? Wait for the panel to ask you questions on it so you can respond. But what you can do is go straight and state. You see, this is just one page. The research approach is mixed. This design is descriptive, research paradigm is pragmatist, and then you have population, 3 selected procurement department of 3 top government institutions, sampling size. Now take note, this guy did a mixed study. So what he did was to establish both the quantitative sampling, technique, and the qualitative also sampling technique, okay, and the size as well. So the quantitative, out of 98, based on research advisors, he picked 98, okay, out of it, and then qualitative, top 3 procurement experts, in 3 selected institutions, but the population has been stated already, that is 100. So he took that out of the 100, 98 was picked, and out of the 98, you have 3 selected top procurement experts were also picked for the qualitative, for the in-depth interview. And then he also indicated that the sampling was stratified, random sampling, and purposive. Stratified for the quantitative and stratified purposive for the qualitative. So stratified random sampling for the quantitative, purposive sampling for the qualitative. So that is done. I think he also talked about the data presentation analysis. He did descriptive statistics, chi-square for correlation, and then correlation analysis, all for the quantitative, the qualitative thematic analysis, so that the interviews were converted to themes, and those themes that are aligned with what they were doing were discussed. Okay, ethical issues should be talked about, and then reliability, Chromback alpha, and then the validity. Now, what this guy didn't do, which we should add, is that once you did a mixed study, you also need the reliability for the qualitative part. And in most cases, we talk about trustworthiness. And one of the key terms we use is credibility. Okay, how did you deal with the data to make it more credible? In some cases, questions are asked in different ways. The same question, interview questions, just to validate what the person has done. And there are tools to do that, okay? So that's what this guy didn't do. And it's something that normally happens, with research. You say you are doing a mixed study and you leave one out. You leave the qualitative part. People don't even bring the findings for the qualitative part, even though they said they are doing a mixed study. So take note of that so that you do this, you align these things very well. And then you come to the results. Now, remember, the results, align it with the research questions. So research question, then you bring the results. For this guy, he did the same thing. Now, the tables have been labeled, if you see. Now, the results should be consistent with the literature that empirical review you did. So these empirical reviews are here. So you would have said that, okay, explain this. Now he is using a Likert scale. So first of all, explain the Likert scale. Don't just go straight to just say that and the results show. No, you have a scale. Strongly agree is 1, so that as you are talking about political interference has a negative effect on value of money, and you say 4.6, those who are the panel members know that 4 is between agree and strongly agree. So it makes sense. So you take your time to explain 1 into details, okay, so that it's easy for you. And then whether this is consistent with existing literature, what we have said here, Victor to 2015 and 2019, Ameya 2012 and all that, whether they are consistent with it or they are variance with it, okay, these things has to be said. And the same thing, a repetition here, the same thing, you see the literature that supports them here, and then other results that the guy brought. And then this guy brings the qualitative part as well. And it's easy when you put it in a table. So you have the question and the respondent, maybe a snapshot of them, okay, just to appreciate that you did the qualitative part. You know you have a very restricted time to do this. So this guy brings that and also state the literature that addresses it. Remember, part of the research question address the quantitative part, and another part also address the qualitative part. So the research question is still stated here, which is also part of the result. There's also another one. Then conclusions. Here, conclusions. Now we bring the objectives. Now, this guy didn't state the objective, but you can state it. So objective 1, you bring it. And in research, your research questions answers your results, answers the research question. That's why in chapter 4, in your discussion, you bring the research question, or even when you are presenting the findings, you do the same thing. And then when you come to the conclusions are supposed to achieve the objective. So you bring the objective. Okay, so objective one, he says that political interference and familiarity with rules and regulation had a significant negative effect on the three predictors. That is what the study concluded based on the supported literature that were literatures that were discussed in the chapter 4. This is what the researcher concludes, and the conclusion is supposed to achieve the objective that has been set, and this thing is done clearly here. And then from there, the recommendations. And the recommendations should be based on the conclusions. All right. So don't go and bring any recommendation that is out of what has been done. It should be based on the conclusion. You understand? Based on the following conclusion, the study recommends that. So you bring the first recommendation. Now, here, be very, very careful. Your recommendation should be detailed in your rhetoric, okay, in your discussion. You should not, if you put the points there, you need to explain it. For instance, people do very comprehensive work, and then when they are done, recommendations that the company should train. What kind of training? It's like you go to hospital and they say you are sick of like malaria, and the doctor says go and take medicine. Does it make sense? Or to go and take malaria medicine. So if you have done this study and you have gotten to this level, you should be able to give detailed recommendation. In fact, at this stage, it's an instruction, it's a directive you are giving to the organization. And where's that must, should be seen in what? Your discussion. Okay, so it says the study recommends the operationalization of the module due to its, the way it's able to measure the effectiveness of what? The efficiency or something. And it says that the study recommends motivation in a form. Now, he didn't say just motivation. Motivation in the form of continuous training, rewards, and incentive, good working environment for procurement practitioners to bring to the media or public notice act of infractions affecting the predictor variables. So he could have said they should be motivated, but he goes specifically to talk of the type of motivation that should be given to workers. And these things are very, very important. So for your recommendation, make sure that based on each conclusion, the conclusions you have each one with its recommendation, and you are detailed in your discussion, and so that panel members will appreciate what you have done. And aside that, you have your references and everything. And also don't forget to thank the panel members. Now you have 10 minutes to do this. Take note that you can apportion your time in such a way that when you get to the literature from the introduction to the methodology, it might take about 4 minutes, okay? Or let's say 5 minutes. The rest of the 5 minutes, dedicate it on the findings, the conclusions, and the recommendations. So thank you so much, and I wish you well in this Viva exercise. God bless you. And this is Dr. David Boison. I am out.